everyone, welcome to the Beyond the Exos podcast, where we discuss mindset and leadership within the world of sports. This podcast is hosted by myself, Dr. Cassidy and Chris, a mental performance coach and founder of CP Mindset, as well as Chris DiPiero, who has spent the past 30 plus years in the game of hockey from the NHL on down, including where he coached me back in my junior days. Now we work together in the mental performance and leadership space. And we've got a great podcast today. Really enjoyed our discussion with Louie, which we'll get into. But first, some news that's probably worth at least touching on briefly. It is taken social media by storm, and Biz Nasty out there is standing up for the players. Babcock's gone. So what's your take on this? This is obviously pretty big news.
Yeah, you know what, Cass? I was shocked. Shocked at sort of the speed at which this took a hold. When it kind of got broke, last week in terms of just the situation that happened, and then kind of how it kind of a couple of senior players were Boone Jenner, captain, and Johnny Gaudreau, star of the team, kind of downplayed it. The NHL had downplayed it. They did a little couple of investigation pieces, so it looked like everything was kind of being downplayed. And then all of a sudden it started to pick up steam late last week again. I think some of the younger players might have felt kind of fearful and not, felt that they probably couldn't say no to Mike Babcock's request to, look at photos on their phone. So kind of an odd request in general. A little bit different in terms of trying to get to know your players. I did see one report where an anonymous head coach in the NHL said, "Hey, what happened to the old, hey, let's go grab a coffee or let's go grab some lunch," to kind of get to know your players and have a, face-to-face discussion and kind of do that. So certainly it's just been a tumultuous week. So not only for Mike Babcock and the Columbus Blue Jacket players, but I have to believe for the organization themselves. They hired Mike Babcock after he was kind of in the basically
hiding.
Yeah, he was in, for 4 years he's been out there, and so they brought him back, right? And so at the time of his hire, it was kind of like, okay, well, maybe he's rehabilitated and he's kind of better, and then unfortunately, this happened. So it's crazy start to the hockey season in the NHL. I guess out of this all, the young players have a voice. The young players, know that they have a voice after the NHL Players Association. And as well, it gives a first-time head coach in Pascal Vincent an opportunity to be head coach in the National Hockey League after being a long-time, head coach in the AHL and the Quebec Junior League. So positives out of it. Pascal Vincent gets his first head coaching job. Young players get a voice, and you're looking forward to a fantastic NHL season.
Yeah, no, it's definitely crossing the line there, like on people's thing. Like, and it's what's interesting. I was doing a workshop with a bunch of coaches recently, and we're just talking about players' phone use, trying not to be on Instagram and TikTok too much. And I'm like, you can't do that's not the Babcock move is not advised, but encouraging players to reflect on minimizing social media use is kind of an important discussion, but this the get to know you, that's not appropriate. So it was quite the interesting news. I don't listen to the Spin Chicklets too often. I was listening to it. I was on big drive. I was like, oh shit. I was like, hearing all the rant. I was like, oh my God. And so definitely we'll see how it unfolds, and hopefully the organization gets back on track, because I know that's what is a big thing, because now all these players are like, I don't want to talk about this and worry about all this nuance. Let's dive into Louie Caporusso. I want you to give him a quick bio. It's a great episode. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you know what? It's great because, Louie's a former teammate of yours, back in the St. Michael's Buzzard days when I coached you both. We won a championship together. And, Louie currently is entering his third season with the Cincinnati Cyclones in the East Coast Hockey League. Prior to that, he played in Europe for 6 seasons with stops in Germany, Sweden, and Italy. In addition, he played in the American Hockey League. He was a 3rd-round pick, 90th overall by the Ottawa Senators in the NHL. And that was after, he joined Ottawa after an outstanding 4-year collegiate career at the University of Michigan, where he was a Hobey Baker finalist in his sophomore year. And then he signed and turned, became a professional. So, Louie is a product of St. Michael's College School, graduate of the school, played 2 years, for the St. Michael's Buzzers. And then, like I said, went on to the University of Michigan. I thought it was a great discussion. Louie's a very thoughtful, very introspective man. It's certainly for me, kind of looking back and having the ability to talk with you and him in the same podcast, and kind of from a different lens now than I would have done 15 years ago as your coach. It was really, really great for me to kind of have a discussion at a different level than coach player. It just seemed that it was more, we were all on the same wavelength, and having a great discussion about performance and those kinds of things. So so what are your thoughts there, Cass?
Yeah, I had so many great takeaways. And when we talk athletes, particularly, everyone, even myself, I'm still working on my articulation of different things and formatting that, like, really well spoken. Really like how he came up with some really great nuggets and ways of saying things that click, which I'm all about, because I think it's how can we get people to think differently and get things that click in their mind so that they can resonate with them. And a couple of the top ones off the bat, he would talk about, like, he had a rough start to his career once he went pro. The things that wasn't scoring. And they really like this, like, it's healthy to be embarrassed was one of those lines. And we get into that where it's like, usually we wouldn't frame it that way. It's like, oh, we want to avoid embarrassment. No, it's actually very healthy, to a degree, it's a type of embarrassment, but it can be a very healthy process to let go of the worry about what other people think. So he really had some good insights. So you definitely want to listen throughout. There's a bunch of other ones, but maybe I'll throw it back to you. Just, what are a couple of your top highlights before we let the listeners dive in?
Yeah, you know what? I think your comment about his ability to articulate things I thought was excellent. One of the things that I take away from me was that he said when things got hard, he used to automatically think that the head coach didn't like him.
Yeah.
And it was his ability to kind of make that shift. It wasn't, that wasn't the case. And like you say, it was kind of an opportunity for him to kind of become introspective and say, okay, how can I grow and be better from this? And, and he mentioned the idea of having a beginner's mindset, and that you're never a finished product. And, the idea and the notion that you're always learning. And I thought that was really, really great. And I think our listeners will love hearing that, whether they're coaches, parents, even players, to take that in, because those kind of nuggets are really, really key. Louis, what is he, 34 years old right now? So he's kind of, he's been through a lot in his hockey career. And the fact that he's still playing tells you about his love, his passion, his fire for the game. And you can hear that, in the way he talks, because he talks about the idea of, he wanting to show that resilience and salvage his career. And I thought that, to me, it was great to see and hear. And, that passion and fire that he has of the game, and he still loves it. So that was great to hear.
Yeah, he's just he's contagious in the way he talks, and he's like, back when we were playing, I remember like being on the bus with him, and like he's a fun guy to be around. So last couple 2 cents, and again, make sure you listen throughout. Really talked about some great practical strategies as well, just around journaling, writing to reflect, deal with your thoughts and emotions, as well as, I talk a lot about clearing fantasies and nightmares, right? There's no fantasy nightmares. And he's like, you really talk about fall in love with the downs. Like, how can you then deal with the struggle versus guys get, they you fight against it and that makes it worse, right? So it's, embrace it and bounce back up. So many good practical nuggets there for players and the coaches to share with them, and parents. So really enjoyed this episode. Make sure you comment, like, share, reach out with any questions, and enjoy this episode as we keep going beyond the X and O's.
Enjoy, everybody.
Louie Caporusso, welcome to the podcast, buddy. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Cass. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we're excited to dive in. You've definitely, back from our playing days, we all played together here, me and you, and under Chris. You've had quite the career, still playing in Cincinnati. Why don't you just give a high level look at your journey, starting, from junior and making the jumps and all the things you've accomplished, and then as well as, obviously, we're going to definitely get into the lessons learned, but just a high level summary of your career so far.
Yeah, I guess if you want to start at the junior level, it was with Coach DePiero with the St. Michael's Buzzers. I think that was my first taste of hockey where I really wanted to pursue it, as a career. Was under Chris, and had one season under Chris, one season under Rich Ritchie. So 2 years with the St. Michael's Buzzers. We won a championship the first year with you there as well. Great experience. And then that first year I was awarded a scholarship to the University of Michigan. And that was the place I always wanted to go. Just a beautiful place. And it always caught my attention anytime we went for a visit with the minor league teams. And when I got a chance to commit to there, that was a no-brainer for me. So went to the University of Michigan, spent all 4 seasons there under Coach Red Berenson. Just before I headed off there, I was drafted by the Ottawa Senators. So spent all 4 seasons, up to my senior year at the University of Michigan. Signed with the Ottawa Senators after my senior season.
Louie, I'm going to interrupt you though. What you're not telling the real story. When you're at Michigan, you were also a Hobey Baker finalist.
That's right.
So let's make sure the listeners out there know that it wasn't just you went to Michigan and filled. You were a Hobey Baker finalist. That's a pretty cool accomplishment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. It makes me feel good. Definitely. I had a lot of success there at the University of Michigan. I was a Hobey Baker finalist my sophomore season. I was an All-American that season, and I really thrived there under Coach Berenson. We won plenty of CCHA championships, came close twice, lost in overtime in the final game of the NCAA championship. It was just an incredible experience playing in front of the fans at Yost. It was, something I'll always remember. No matter how far guys go in the NHL or wherever they go, they still remember their days playing at Yost Ice Arena for the University of Michigan. So it's something very special. And the success I had there was great. So then to continue on, I signed with the Ottawa Senators out of college. Was placed in the farm system. I was playing in between Binghamton and Elmira. It didn't have the success I probably wanted coming out of college. Then I signed a deal with the Reading Royals, hoping I would get some AHL, interest, but it didn't really happen after the first couple months playing with Reading. So I decided to take an opportunity to play in the DEL, the German top league. And I spent upwards of almost 6 years there. In the meantime, I'd made a stop in Sweden for a quick couple months. Didn't really jive there too well, but ended up playing in Italy for a couple months. And now I'm back playing in the East Coast Hockey League again. So that's just a quick summary.
Yeah. And obviously lots of lessons learned, and everyone's path is always a bit different. What, and I've got a few things we'll prime, but when you look at your career, I know you did some good posts recently. You've been doing lots of writing. What are some of like the high level main lessons you've learned about your mindset, about leadership, throughout that journey, and the highs and the lows and the, and the navigating, making those different turns along the way? How would you answer that?
Man, I can give you a lot of information about that. I guess where I'll start is, like highs and lows. When you say that comes to mind right away, because that has been the bulk of my career, has been highs and lows. When you're young, and especially coming out of college, when you're a drafted player and you're having a successful seasons in college hockey, you think the NHL is the next step, and that's how it's going to happen. And for me, like an immediate low going into pro hockey was probably facing a situation where I didn't feel my AHL coach was a big fan of my game for whatever reason. And up until that point, I always had coaches that liked me, liked my game, wanted the best for me. And I'm not saying he didn't want the best for me, but it was the first time I actually ran into a coach that perhaps was going to make me, have to pay my dues. And when you're a skilled guy growing up, you kind of get those opportunities and they're just given to you. You never expect to have to work for them. So an immediate low would have been coming out of college and not getting the opportunities I thought I deserved with the Ottawa Senators. And, I could have been better prepared for a situation like that, but I wasn't for whatever reason. And that's an immediate low. But I think coming out of that and still salvaging a career for myself is a high that I look at and I think about all the time, because hockey has given me so many opportunities, and some of the highs don't always come in the form of the game, but they also come in the form of experiences. Being able to travel to Europe and live a lifestyle in Germany and Sweden and Italy, and getting paid to do so has been a blessing for myself and my family. So, there's a lot of good things that have come out of the game. More specifically, I think with each team, you and each season, you're going to go through your highs and lows. So you can always kind of dial in a little more and see the little highs and lows. And we can talk more about that as well. But so that's pretty much, the gist of like how my career has gone. And now I'm in a stage where I try to basically help these guys navigate those waters, because I know how tough it can be at times and how lonely of a place it can feel when you're trying to create something for yourself and trying to stay in the game, because it's such a hard thing to do. And there's a lot of things I wish I would have done differently. When I first signed out of college, like I mentioned before, having a coach that maybe didn't understand my game yet, or didn't appreciate my game, I could have maybe given that relationship with him more of a chance and went to speak with him more. I didn't have that maturity level I wish I had at the time to deal with that situation. I think if I would have just consulted him a bit more, maybe I would have been given more of an opportunity. Instead, I think I took it too emotionally and thought that perhaps he didn't like me. And I think a lot of players do that. When things get hard, you assume that the person doesn't like you, but it could just be that they're testing you, or they got to get to know you a little better. So I think that's something I could have done differently that may have changed the trajectory for my North American career. But ultimately, it ended up the way it did, and I'm happy for it.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. I'm sure Chris will have some comments on this as well, around even we just go to the coach situation, which is a great analogy for coaches listening, for players listening, to think about lessons learned. And I do this a lot, because we get a lot of players who will complain about their coach, and sometimes justifiably so, maybe to a degree. And there's always, we're big advocates of coaches learning to be effective at communicating. But it's not easy to be a coach, and you're managing a lot of people and expectations and trying to read minds. But generally, most coaches, and maybe not all, but generally most, don't wake up and be like, can't wait to screw over Louie today. It's like, what I mean? Like that's not their intent usually. It could be the odd, like really old school ones. Like, no, I gotta push them down to put them up. It's just like, they're just doing what they think is best. They might not be the best communicators because maybe they hadn't learned it yet or whatever, or just because it's hard being a coach, and especially in like minor and junior hockey where maybe it's not the coach's main thing. But I think that's a great, reflection, and like, hey, having the maturity, learning to just go and self-advocate and probe and reflect and be curious to like, hey, what can I do differently? How can we get on the same page? And maybe, I don't know if you want to speak to that, and Chris, I know you'll probably jump in on this, but just like, has there been other times now throughout your career since then where you've worked a bit more intentionally on your side to cultivate those relationships with coaches since that initial, maybe a tough one in Binghamton?
But yeah, I mean, I know Chris could allude to this too. You're never going to find a coach that you get along with 100%. There's even my coach to this day, we butt heads at times, and that's natural. I think, every coach is different, and every team is different, and every situation is different. And I definitely communicate more now with my coaches. The thing is, sometimes you have to be careful, because when I first started communicating with my coaches, I always thought in the back of my head, do I look like I'm brown nosing to my teammates? Do I look like I'm trying to suck up? And I think once you just get rid of that opinion about yourself and what people may be thinking, then I think you really start opening the lines of communication with your coaches. And that's when I realized, like, hey, I'm just talking about whatever it is I need to do to make the team better, whatever he wants from me. And if I can get that communication from him, I'm going to be able to perform better on the ice. And, a lot of the times I like to have clarity in what I need to do out there to not, basically, piss him off. And if I can get that clarity, then I know where I can use my creativity and where I can go on my own on the ice and do the things I want to do to help the team, and me specifically, and what I bring uniquely to the team can help. So I think that's been huge for me, is just trying to communicate what exactly he wants from me so that I don't have to be thinking out there and I can just go out and play the game and use my skills.
There's two things I want to kind of dig in on there, Lou, is the one you talked about, salvaging a career. And what I like that term because, to me, I wrote down beside that, it shows your resilience.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe resilience is rooted in the love of what we do. When we love what we do, we will find the resilience, we'll find the strength to kind of forge ahead. Is that something that you've always had, or is that something you developed? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I would say that I think I was just very proud of what I brought to the game. I was proud of myself and all the accomplishments I had made up until that point in pro, and I wasn't just going to let it go to waste. And I couldn't live with it not being used and not being shown to the world or whoever was going to come watch me play. I just felt like I believed in myself as a hockey player, so it didn't really matter what had happened to me. I knew that at some point someone would recognize what I brought to the table, and then that way I can continue doing what I love. So I think it was the belief in my abilities. I never once doubted myself. I may have lost confidence at times, but I knew what I was capable of all the time, and that's what helped with that resilience, because I knew it was just a matter of time before someone picked up on it and was able to give me an opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's great, because I just, to me, I think it's important because, like, as Cass talked about, and you mentioned the highs and the lows, right? Every athlete, every player, everybody's going to go through highs and lows, and it's just being able to recognize, okay, where am I working towards? So that's why I think it was important that, I wanted you to articulate that idea of resilience, because I think it's tied to the love of the game. And, again, I've known you since you're 14 years old. I've always known you to have a pure love of the game. You've always enjoyed being on the ice. You've enjoyed the pursuit of, you weren't shy from working hard. You had talent, you had skill and all that stuff, but you were able to put that together. So I'm happy to hear that that's still there for you now as a young man. The second part that I wanted to dig down with you and what you said, and it's interesting because a lot of young players, not necessarily young pros, and but maybe teenagers, junior, maybe freshman, sophomore in college, the idea that they're assuming their coaches don't like them when things get hard, and then the emotional reaction, as opposed to understanding that that's part of the process, and to not let that emotional reaction get in, because once you start doing that, it's almost like you're taking things personally.
Exactly.
And coaches aren't going to sit there and like Cass said, unless there's an old school coach, right? Like an old school, but typically most coaches aren't, thinking about screwing over a player, every single day. So how, what would you be able to say? Because you learned through your experience to then articulate what you articulated again, as now as a young man, as a seasoned pro player. What about kind of setting some advice for that guy going into his minor midget OHL, CHL draft year, or that 18-year-old freshman going to college, or anybody in that regard? How what can you say to those guys?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. There's a ton I would like to say, but if I were to sum it up in the amount of time we have here, it would be that you never have a finished product, and I think a lot of guys think, and they're concerned about what people think of who they are in that moment as a player and where they stand and skill wise, ability wise. And I just think you always got to see yourself as a beginner and always bring that beginner mindset to the game. And when you do that, maybe you won't take things so personally, and once you realize that you're always learning and that your product's never finished, no matter what happens, you know that it's a step forward, good or bad, because now you're one step closer to understanding the game a bit better, one step closer to being better skill wise, or even one step closer to learning how to deal with tough situations. So it's to have that mindset of a beginner and try to take that with you no matter how far you go in the game. Even for me right now, I still try to approach it as a beginner. I will take information from pretty much anybody if I think it makes sense. I don't really care what your credentials are in the game. if it makes sense to me and I think it can make me a better hockey player mentally or physically, I'm going to take that advice.
Love it.
Yeah. I love that so much. I want to hit on two things you've already just spoke about. One, just back to the grit. How much, because the other thing we know about grit too, and you alluded to, you didn't face as much adversity, and like that was then a significant major adversity as soon as you hit pro. How much of that moment have you looked back on and leaned on as a source of grit? And because like grit, some of the research and people have highlighted comes from dealing with tough stuff, and that can actually fuel us. Like I look back, obviously didn't have the career nearly close to yours, but my first year in the OHL, I had a 0-point season, like barely played. And that gave me a lot of grit. That's made a lot of other things now in the rest of my life seem a lot easier to deal with because of that tough time period, and that I was able to move forward from that. And like you said, in your situation, salvage your career. Does that resonate for you? How much have you leaned on that year and turned it from what was definitely a struggle and a challenge into something that has fueled you and helped you be that much more resilient in future adversities, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's healthy for everyone at some point in their life to get embarrassed and to be embarrassed in front of your colleagues and people watching you, because once you get embarrassed enough times, then you can just move forward and start not caring about what people think of you. And I think I had a similar situation in the AHL. I had 0 points in the first 13 games of my AHL career. And that wasn't like me. That wasn't characteristic of me. Mind you, I was getting like 3 minutes of ice a night, but regardless, but still, you see that stat line and then you wonder what people are thinking of you. And you get kind of shy. People that you were competing with in the game are now at levels maybe higher than you, having success in the NHL. At the same time, my best friend at the time, and still is one of my best friends, Carl Hagelin, he was having success in the NHL and he was playing for the New York Rangers. And this is a guy that, competed with me at Michigan, and, he's one of my good buddies. And now here I am, I'm in the East Coast Hockey League, or I can barely, make a dent in the AHL. What does that say about me? What do all my teammates that I play with think about what's happened to me, right? So all these things can start playing on you and start making you feel small or making you feel embarrassed about what you've accomplished or what you're doing. And I think once that happens enough times, you start to not care so much about what people think. And then you could just start playing and bringing that unique sense of who you are to the game.
Yeah, that's I don't know if I've ever heard someone say that. But I think that's quite profound. That you need that experience of being embarrassed and hitting failing in front of other people, is actually such a healthy, growing opportunity. So I'm really glad you shed light on that. And again, I think, different but similar stories. And again, I had one game, I had 0 minutes, by the way, that year in my 0 minute game. So I was like, coach, when am I going in? So now it didn't go. And I remember even going back home at the end of that season and going back to my hometown. I was a whole season of no points. And someone's like, I could have got a point if I played. I was like, are you kidding me? The embarrassment and frustration. I just wanted to quit hockey. I was like, I should just go under a rock. But now the ability to let go and create my own opinion of myself that matters most, not be dependent on the external validation and opinions of others. So really well said, Louie.
Yeah, it's sort of cutting Cass, but that's one thing I think a lot of young players, if we're going to touch Chris on what a young player can do, is be confident and be proud of what you bring to the table, because it's unique, and I think every player is unique. And when you look at any top player in the world, they have a unique way of playing the game, and a lot of times you should be proud of it, and you don't always have to be imitating someone else or comparing yourself to other people. And I just feel like young players nowadays, especially with all these skill development camps and all these, coaches that are trying to teach the game, and a lot of the time their own unique abilities can get lost in all that. And I just think you got to be proud of how you're a unique player and use that to your advantage.
That's such a great comment, because actually I had a discussion with one of the client that I work with, defenseman, and he asked me, young guy, he had asked me about that concept of comparing.
and what that means, and how can he not, how can he stop doing that? And one of the things I said to him was not so much wording it like you just did, but it's being able to go inward versus going outward. And going inward in terms of he has his strengths and his capabilities of what he can bring to the table. But I always talk about, for me, it's like the ability to have joy about what you do. And when we compare, there's a famous saying, comparison is the thief of joy. And so I use that a lot. And so when we discover the joy that we have, and to your point, like you're saying, be proud of what, what you bring to the table because you're unique in what you do, then that's the joy that you bring to the table as, a centerman, a left winger, a defense, whatever position you're playing, and let that be your calling card. It's hard though, Lou. It's hard. We're talking as three grown men, and it's hard for that 16-year-old or that 18-year-old or that 20-year-old freshman or sophomore, because, that they've got this weight of expectations and this weight of pressure. As you said, what are they thinking of me? What's, there's 30 guys on a college roster. Am I going to be in the lineup next week? How do we impact those kids?
Yeah. The easy answer, and if everyone can do this, was imagine you had a timeline that was infinite. A lot of times we're rushing to the next point, we're rushing to the next achievement, we're rushing to the next goal that we have, that we're so concerned that we're not moving fast enough and that we're not getting where we want to go quick enough. But if you can, and this is very difficult, but if you can change your time horizon so that you feel like, imagine you could be trying to become the best player in the world for 200 years. Like imagine you had that capability. We're talking obviously, abstract here, but imagine what you could accomplish, because you would just let go and start learning and getting better every day. And I think a lot of times it's the pressure and the time frames that people put on themselves that ends up making them want to cheat the game or cheat themselves and think, I have a lot of people call me sometimes trying to get them, can you get me a deal in Europe? Can you do this? Can you do that for me in Europe? And it's like, well, I don't think I'm your issue. I think you just work on your game, and then you'll get that opportunity, right? So if I could give that a bit of advice, would be to try to extend the time horizon so that you don't feel that pressure and you just enjoy getting better at whatever you're doing.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, and I like frame it as like it's less a matter of if you're going to make it. It's like, am I going to make it now? And this make or break and these unrealistic pressures that people will put. And it's like, it's more of a matter of when. It's just like, who knows when? Is it this year? Is it next year? Like, and just keep pursuing it. And that's and even just as a funny thing, as outside of hockey, like even this career that I get to do now, I remember I finished school. It's like, yeah, I want to do this as my main thing. And someone's like, what if it doesn't work out? And I was like, oh shit, what if it doesn't work out? Like, what if I don't and I was like, no, screw that. It's just a matter of when. I don't know if it's going to take me a year, 3 years. I want to do this, is what I like doing. I'm going to find a way and keep moving forward. And obviously that's different than a hockey career, because there is barriers and obstacles that are out of your control more in a way, and youth. But I really like the change the horizon narrative is very serving. And it's a perspective exercise, which helps us accept and now just be in the moment and enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I love, there's so much strong stuff in there. I want to go into, I know a little bit, but I want you to elaborate. Think about like the biggest strategy, tactic, thing that served you in your mindset, your career, helped you work through the highs and the lows and navigating, dealing with overthinking, all that kind of stuff. And then we can unpack a little further, because I know I think it's related to the journaling, as you alluded to before, off camera. Do you want to tap into that? Some of the strategies, things you've really served you in your career?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is mindset. It's, you could bring so many different attitudes towards the game. I can't exactly recall every time I was in a tough spot and how I exactly got out of it. You don't always necessarily know what exactly it was that, broke the camel's back. But, I think we alluded to it quite a bit, and it's back to that time horizon thing. It's back to that joy of enjoying what you're doing. And then also kind of falling in love with the downs, like the hard parts. you realize that they're inevitable. At some point, I think as I got older in my career, I noticed that they were inevitable, and that they're going to come regardless. So you got to embrace them, and you got to enjoy them in a way, because that the next step is coming out of them. So yeah, like, I don't know, more specific. If you give me more specific question, maybe I can give you more.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I want to just maybe even iterate the fantasies and nightmares, and like learning to embrace and stand, like it's a lot of times, and maybe you can elaborate. And I was talk about maybe some of the journaling I know you've done, but a lot of players have this fantasy of like going pro, or this fantasy about how their career will be. And like, not like what you're signing up for is a bumpy ride. Like, it's like, this is the reality. And so it's like, so don't just like, be miserable in the downs and be happy in the high. That's going to, exaggerate them now, and your lows will be that much lower because of it. But when you can let go of the fantasy and learn to just embrace, like, hey, the lows are actually great growing opportunities and challenges, and it's just a result. It's what you're signing up for. So you can maybe elaborate on that. And then I know you said previously, like the journaling, reflecting, and to help you process your thoughts as like a strategy, like a tactical thing that helps bring these ideas and concepts or principles to life, and then and actually helps speed it up. But yeah, go dive into that a bit.
So the journaling for me started when I realized that I was taking part in practice and not necessarily knowing what I got better at. So for me, I would start basically writing down what I did at practice and what I felt I wasn't doing well on the ice. So whatever it may be, maybe not catching a pass the right way, or not taking a correct angle, or not shooting a certain type of shot very well. And I started documenting those things specifically. And then what I would do is within that same journal entry, I would pick out a point or two that I needed to get better at, and I would just write it down. And for whatever reason, whenever I wrote it down, it kind of started keeping me honest. Because then when I would come back to the journal, I would see like, okay, I haven't really gotten better at these things that I was talking about. Or it would just make me feel like a sense of needing to do something with every practice I had out there. And it wasn't just participating in a team practice, because a lot of times team practices, you can get lost in just trying to learn a system for a coach or the typical routine drills. So you don't get into the specifics of your game that you want to get better at. So it started really there. And then when it transitioned into emotional and like psychological, was when I just realized I was getting to a point where I think hockey was getting so tough for me mentally. I said to myself, well, if I just write it down, maybe it won't feel so tough. And I actually remember the first time I actually ever journaled was I had a game I was playing against the Marlies. And the funny thing is, Chris was at that game. I don't know if he remembers, but I was a minor hockey player playing against the Marlies, and a Michigan coach was there to watch me play. And I remember having such a bad game. And I remember Chris, I was supposed to join the Buzzers the next year. And I remember Chris gave me a little bit of shit the next day about the game too. I think I was just like not really pulling my weight out there. But that night after the game, I decided, I felt so terrible about the game and everything that had happened. I said, I got to just write it down. And I remember just handwriting it out, and I remember saying like, this is what happened to me today, and this is not going to be the end. I'm going to, and I just told myself, it was basically a self-affirmation type journal to myself about here you are in this moment. And it was almost like a letter in a bottle that I considered it for myself for when I got older. So I always remembered that journal in my head about that down feeling I had in that moment. So when I got older and I had these bad experiences, I always remember, oh yeah, I remember writing that journal down, and I remember how crappy I felt at that time. But look at where you are now, and look where you've come. So you've gotten past that. And I think that started building confidence. It's almost like documenting your lows, so that in the future, when you have them, you have the chance to look back and say, okay, look, I've been through something like this before. I know what it's like, so I can get past this again. It gives you that confidence. And so there's something about putting things on paper. I don't know what it is, but when you write things down about your emotions and how you feel about the game, how you feel about your coach or the way you're playing, for whatever reason, it starts to process. It starts to you start to metabolize whatever it is that you're going through. And the more you do that, I feel like the lighter you play and the better you feel out there. So a lot of times, a lot of players and young people may wonder, how do I start? And you can really just start by writing down whatever you're thinking. And it could be anything that you're thinking, and just see where your thoughts take you. You don't have to write a novel. You're not writing a script. You're just writing your thoughts as they hit the paper. And it's amazing where your thoughts will take you. And then you can start identifying them after. As you write it, you'll start identifying, whoa, 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 like that. This is my problem. This isn't the coach's problem. Or maybe my parents have to stop doing this. I've realized what they're doing that's kind of causing me all these problems, and it's funny when you start writing things out. And I've done it ever since. I don't do it as much as I would like to now because I have 3 kids, but I try to still do it. And you can take that into any aspect of your life.
What I like about what you said there, Lou, aside from the fact that I gave you shit there, what I like about what you said was how it allowed you to kind of create a reference point for you, so that when you go through, as you've got this journal that you have as like evidence of saying, hey, I went through this before. So it's not like every new low is like a catastrophic low. You've gone through something like that before, you survived, and then you thrived out of it. And I would suggest more people that would do what you did and currently do in terms of the journaling like that. If more people did that, I think they'd be that much more successful, based on not having to feel that the weight of the world is on them when they hit those lows.
Exactly.
And that's what I think that to me is the key point there. Because as a coach, I'm an advocate. I've done it. I've been journaling since I first became a coach, and it wasn't just about practice plans. It's about what's going on. Hey, you know what? Yeah, I would write stuff down and kind of talk about, okay, so and so did this great today, and hey, yeah, Preston and Caporusso really pissed me off today at practice, but or whatever. But I would write it down as, again, using that as a reference point, and so we can always go back to kind of. But I think the act of writing, as you suggested, allows you to continue to move forward, and I think that seems to be the theme of our discussion. Really, is about that resiliency and moving forward, not letting every high be too high or any low be that catastrophic. So that's the beauty, I think, of journaling, and I think you articulated that really well. So thanks.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks, Chris. And a lot of times there's not necessarily a solution in looking back at your journals, and I think that's the key difference people have to understand, is that there's no solutions in them, but there's comfort, and sometimes that's enough to make you get through those rough times.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, it's really well said. And I'll frame it this way, like one of the strategies we use and recommend a lot and get our athletes to do is we call it a personal scorecard, which is a cool way to like, okay, well, let's track the things that matter, both technically, tactically, but definitely mentally in the mental state. But there's a space to reflect and write, or think and process, and often write or type. And it's very effective. And also, even just when you have a coach or someone, a third party to talk out and air out your ideas. And often once you air it out, then the solution becomes quite easy. And like I say this all the time, it's like, we'll spend a majority of what I do is actually find what is the problem with an athlete. The solutions are easy once we identify the problem. And when you write it out or you speak it out, it's like, oh, it doesn't seem such, it's like, oh, I can deal with this. And like, and I remember doing this even when I was young. I don't remember the exact thing, but like, oh, this is so tough. Oh, woe is me, complain, right? Like lethargic, and then for you, like a lot of athletes do it. So like give them their empathy and the comfort of doing that. And it's like, okay, I've got it all out there. F this. This is how I'm showing up now moving forward. I'm done doing my own little pity party. I've aired out my pity party to myself or to the paper or to, a confidant. Now I can choose to be like, and that sounds like what you did in that Marlies game, is like, why did I do this? Oh, I'm an idiot. Like, you're flushing it out. And then you're like, I am not doing this shit anymore. Like, I'm getting back after it. Like, and in order to, and it goes back to like one of the most fundamental principles with everything is acceptance commitment. You're learning to accept your thoughts, your feelings, what's going on. So now that you can commit to who do you want to be and how you want to show up. And so that is, the journaling, personal scorecard, talking to somebody, talking about seeing the horizon helps you accept and then commit to the present day. All of this different stuff is overlapping and interconnected. So I don't know if that sparks anything for you, but I think it's a great way for people to hear somebody going through it and kind of you picked it up along the way, and to see the impact of being mindful of working through your thoughts and the feelings. And maybe the last thing then that will help tee up maybe a little thing you can dive into is, within overthinking, which is a very common area of the game, what you're doing when you journal and talk and do these things, you think more before, so you can think less during.
Yep.
And by thinking more before and processing your thoughts and your feelings and emotions, that you can now just be immersed in the moment. You've mentally prepared yourself. And so I don't know if you want to speak to that and some of the there's lots of other things to do with thinking more before and thinking differently, like learning to accept and get perspective. But maybe just let you run with a bit of the overthinking and dive into that a bit.
Yeah, it's overthinking still happens to me today a lot. I think everyone knows that you can easily get in your head, especially if you're the type of person who likes to read a lot and you think a lot and you talk a lot. Well, and it's going to continue to happen. So I think you make a good point, Cass. It's like when you're able to do all your pre-thinking, pretty much. In other words, you're able to just let it all go and just play and do whatever it is you want to do. What would be really nice is if you could just calm down the amount of thinking you do to begin with. And, I think a lot of people overthink things all the time. And, I know some of the best players I ever got a chance to play with. I remember going to camps with Eric Carlson, and, the guy would just, put a chew in, and he didn't look like he had a thought in the world, like he was there to have a good time. He was just so confident in who he was. And then you would see another person who looks like they were thinking about every little thing. And what does this person think of me? What do I got to do out there? And don't get me wrong, there's some good types of thinking, and a lot of it is, good in terms of, like, for example, like visualization. That's an incredible tool. That can work incredible for somebody. But I just think when if you can just slow down the amount of thinking you do and just try to remember that it's a game and try to just play the game, you can start enjoying it. I look at like a goal scorer, for example, and this may sound funny or sound weird, but so many players think about how they're going to score goals instead of just going out there and just trying to score a goal, and then there's like a big difference. It's like, at the beginning of a season, a goal scorer may say, I plan to score this many goals this year, and this is how you score goals, and I'm learning all these ways to score goals. And then you may have another guy who may not have put any thought into that, but just goes out there and just tries to score goals. So, it's that difference, you see it all with the greats. I notice all the greats seem to be just naturals when it comes to that.
Yeah. And I'll dive in, like, one of the most fundamental things with overthinking, you tell me, you pretty much just touched on it, is trying to force things and control the outcome and perfection based versus let it happen and just trust yourself. And you've done the training, now let it happen. And you think of, like, even decision making, which is, you can probably relate a lot as a forward on a 2-on-1. Do I shoot? Do I pass? What do I decide to do? Well, if you're like, try to analyze and do what you think is right and make the perfect right decision, it's going to lead usually to overthinking. And now you're judging yourself instead of like, let me be aware and do what I feel is best, which is a more intuitive, instinctual type of decision making. And so, because even the word decision, we usually think analyze. It's like an analytical and more explicit control, perfect, like doing accounting or math. That doesn't really generally help in most sporting situations. Like, there's this more intuitive process and trusting and doing what you feel. So that's, like you said, it's like trying to predict how you're going to score, and trying to predicting it doesn't help. Being present helps, and trusting and letting it happen. And so setting that as an intention is also very helpful, in knowing that distinction. Yeah. And the other big common mistake is like, okay, I did that, I let it happen, but then I don't score. Now I need to score, and they flip back, and now you're creating this spiral. And so you can just stay over here, use the resilience and grit we talked about earlier. Definitely helps. Anything you want to add to that?
I love the point you make of setting it as an intention, because a lot of people may talk about it, but they don't exactly carry that out, and I think when it comes to a hockey game or any type of sport that you're playing, if I can always live with a decision I made because I thought in my heart it was the best one at the time. But what really chaps my ass off is if I come back to the bench and I made a decision based on what a winger thought I should have done at that time, or what my coach thought I should have done, and it didn't work out. Obviously, you got to listen to your coach in terms of the systems and everything. But when it comes to, like you said, a 2-on-1 or whatever, I mean, and anybody who golfs knows how it works. You try to adjust your swing on the course, you're gonna have a miserable day. You go to the range and try to adjust your swing. You can't do that on the course. And at the course, you got to just let it flow.
Yeah. No, I love it. Chris, do you want to add anything? I know we gotta be mindful of our time, and really appreciate Louie, lots in here. Chris, you want any final thoughts, questions here as we start to wrap up?
I just like the idea of the deciding piece, because I just think once you commit to a decision, it's not about analyzing, it's committing to the decision, because as you just said, Louie, too, it's if you know in your heart that's the right decision, then make the decision. Is it going to always succeed? No, but at least you know that you made the decision for the right moment, in that moment, for the right reason. So I think that's the biggest thing. So yeah, no, this has been great. It's been really cool to hear you articulate these things, and I think you do it really well. Not only, I mean, I've saw, we talked about your social media stuff, that I think you write really well, but now, even now articulating it verbally has been fantastic. So I really, really appreciate it. And it's great for me as a former coach of yours to reconnect with you and have listen to where you are and hear all the great things you're doing, both personally and professionally. I think it's fantastic. So really, really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks a lot, Chris. And a lot of that, I really appreciate everything you did for me when I was young, and I always looked forward to one day playing for you. And a lot of my drive came from wanting to play for you one day with the Buzzers. And then when I had the chance to and the privilege to, it was one of my biggest growth seasons of my life. And I was under your lead, and you taught me so much, and I'll always be in debt to you for that. And I appreciate it very much. And it's great talking to you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. But you did the work. You accomplished what you did. It was you that did it. So
yeah, I know, but I learned a lot from you, and you taught me a lot, and you paved the way for me, and you weren't about yourself. You're about your team. You've always been that way. So that's huge for a player growing.
Well, thank you.
I love it. That was a fun year, man. I remember good times. With Smitty, we're gonna get Smitty on here.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get Smitty on here.
We're gonna get Smitty on here. But
get all three of them.
Yeah, getting all three of them. Yeah. So we were talking about that. We got to reach out. But final thoughts, takeaways, any final parting thoughts for coaches, leaders, people in life, let alone obviously athletes. And then we'll also wrap up, shout out to how people may want to contact you or follow you online, that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Cass. Thanks for having me on, man. This has been awesome. I still remember when you came onto the Buzzers, you had the OHL helmet on, and I was like, who's this guy, But you scored some big goals for us when we won the league there. You scored some big goals in the playoffs. Thanks for having me on. You guys can try to find me on Twitter or whatever, but I'm probably really busy. I got the 3 kids running around right now, and my wife wants to do something new every day. I'm like, I'm like a tour bus right now. So, if you guys anyone can always reach out to me. I think my Twitter is like @Louie Caporusso.
Yeah.
So just shoot me a message, and if you need any help, maybe I can help you. I don't know. We'll see.
I love it. Well, we'll stay in touch, Louie, and I'm sure we'll probably we could go on a couple more of these down the road and have fun this year. And thanks again for coming on, talk about the mindset, your career lessons learned, leadership as well, as always tied into that. So thanks very much, man.
Thank you, guys. Hey, let's talk soon.
Have a great year, Lou.
Thanks, Coach. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Cass.